I'm excited and grateful to have Dom David Waters with me today. Dom David grew up in Kathmandu, Nepal as the son of missionaries and moved to the U.S. when he was 12 years old. He converted to Catholicism while attending Baylor University. So here's somebody in the university converting to Catholicism. I like that. And shortly thereafter, started considering religious life. As a convert, the liturgy was something that always stood at the forefront of his life as a Catholic, since it was not something he was very familiar with growing up, and he found it exquisitely beautiful. I love that, Dom David, exquisitely beautiful. Consequently, when considering religious life, Dom David naturally gravitated toward the Benedictines, whose great care is the liturgy. Let nothing be put before the work of God. It's one of the rules of Saint Benedict. Moreover, the Benedictines' groundedness in reality through work and prayer was something that resonated with him, since the same sort of thing had been inculcated in him since boyhood. Adoration also played a pivotal role in Dom David's conversion, and when he discovered an order of Benedictines of perpetual adoration, it was the convergence of many desires that the Lord had put and placed on his heart. Dom David entered in 2020. It's currently in his simple vows, and he hopes to make final vows in September of this year, so it's coming up. Dom David, welcome.
Thank you very much, Jack. It's great to be here. I'm glad to talk a little bit about myself, talk a little bit about the book, and yeah, I appreciate this a bunch for welcoming you onto your show.
Yeah, and just before we came on, you're located in Ireland. And so tell us just a little about where you're at, and then I got to back up into Kathmandu.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I'm at Silver Stream Priory in Ireland. We're a monastery, a Benedictine monastery of perpetual adoration. We're the only male monastery in the world that actually male Benedictine monastery of perpetual adoration. We've got about 16 brothers here, and we devote our lives. Well, first, as I mentioned in the bio, the liturgy and putting nothing before the work of God, but then also, of course, this charism of adoration, and particularly adoration in the spirit of reparation for the sins
Oh
of the
yeah.
world, for the church, and for priests in particular. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if when people understand, Dom David, the spiritual battle that we're in, right, between
Mm,
our Lord and Satan, I
absolutely.
love. We work with young families, young people in young families, especially. We do a lot of other things with the John Paul II Renewal Center, but it's that, Sister Lucia of Fatima said the last great battle between our Lord and Satan is going to be over marriage and the family, and we
Mm,
see that spiritual battle. And so what you're doing there, yeah, I don't know if people understand it as much. If we get a couple of minutes through the show just to talk about that battle, I'm sure that
yeah.
you understand that very well as you're in adoration praying. I mean, we really need this. People sometimes don't understand how important those prayers are from monasteries and convents all around the world, do they?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean the charism of reparation in particular here as well. It's not it's I mean it's adoration, but also very much in the spirit of trying to repair all of the damage done, I suppose,
Yeah,
by the great apostasies, by
yeah,
turning away from the truth, and the crazy things going on in secular society, and the great attack on the family. Absolutely, it's a spiritual battle, and I suppose well, if you have your army, perhaps there are some who are more just like straight military, some who are a bit more reserved, some who maybe like the military chaplains, and I don't know where we'd fall in. Maybe a little bit of the chaplaincy, a little bit, trying to heal the wounded soldiers on the battlefields, and but then at the same time, yeah, no, it's absolutely true, and adoration is a great weapon in that arsenal and in the battle. One of my favorite feasts is the Feast of Saint Michael, and there's an antiphon that we sing that just about while the dragon waged war, there was silence and adoration in heaven, and it's
mhm,
like this is how we
yeah,
wage our war, is silence and
yeah.
adoration. Yeah.
Well, it all comes down to the battlefield of the individual human heart. So
Mm,
I'm sure
absolutely.
that as you're praying there, that you're feeling that battle going on. So that battle is raging. So I wouldn't put you in the reserves, and I wouldn't just say, and even though you are there to help heal, the soldiers on the battlefield, you also are in the front lines
Yeah,
of that
absolutely.
battle, because I'm sure Satan would love to get to you guys, because look at one of the things of reparation. I mean, that the Catholic Church really, had some problems, and we don't have to get into all that in Ireland. I mean,
Right, right, yeah.
where the Irish lost their faith, basic. I mean, I'm
Yeah.
generalizing here, right?
Yeah,
But
absolutely. No, no, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, it's one of the great tragedies of Christendom that Ireland's just a country that would not let go of their faith for hundreds of years of persecution, and
Mm.
then just in the last 2 decades, it's just totally plummeted, and it's a great tragedy, a great loss to the faith around the world, and yeah, reparation is important on that front.
Yeah, and then we see the fallout from that is young people, especially. So here, I'll give you an idea, and I want to and I want to before we dive into this book, which is just for today, which we I really wanted you to talk about. I
Yeah,
want to go back to some of these words though that you said. So I just had, I don't know if you know who Jason Jones is, but he's an author, he's a movie maker. He wrote a book. Sophia Press published a book, the great campaign against the Great Reset. But anyways, we start to talk about pornography and the devastation it has for young men. And I've worked with a number of young men addicted to porn, and they all got into this, Dom David, by accident. They'd hear
yeah,
something in school, they Google it, and this is hardcore porn and how it twists your mind, your heart. At the end of the day, one of the most beautiful things that you can do for a young man, and young women, I guess too, but I don't work with young women as much, is to get them into a beautiful church and
mm,
and come back into the liturgy, and they all have. I mean, if you're going to
absolutely.
overcome this battle, so let's just talk a little bit about, you said exquisitely beautiful. You were drawn to that liturgy. Let's spend a couple of minutes because this will bring us right subway right into this book, because this is what the book does, is bring beauty back into our hearts.
Mhm.
But when you contrast this, the of hardcore porn and the twisting and distortion of our beauty of our bodies and sexuality, and then you walk into a church, a beautiful, this is the question I want to ask you, is how important it is to keep the liturgy beautiful, because
Yeah,
it's not always beautiful, and we're all fighting for that. Like the young people that I know gravitating to the traditional Latin mass, they're doing it because of beauty.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's, I mean, as you mentioned, there's a stark contrast between, that very voyeuristic sin of, like looking into something, but, being deceived, thinking that it's something beautiful, that is good, but like in a very distorted, grotesque way. But then completely contrast that with, your same eyes now gazing on true beauty, those same eyes that might have, looked at something terrible, um but then now they're looking at like it I guess the reparative effect of
Mm,
beautiful liturgy. That
that's a
I'm
great way
and
to
and
put
it,
it. Yeah.
it's not just pornography. It's, there's so much ugliness in the world, so much,
Mm,
people always like kind of, throwing all the attention on the bad and the terrible, and, this thing is going south, this thing, war and all of it, and young men also growing up with like lots of really violent video games, for example,
hmm
it's totally inculcated into the culture. Just ugliness is just there,
hmm
you
We
know
we profane the beauty, haven't we?
yeah,
Huh?
yeah, absolutely. But then the reparative effect of
Mm,
walking into a beautiful church, a beautiful liturgy, it's almost something that the heart realizes, in all the things I've been looking at, this is the thing that I actually have been longing for, right? This is
mhm.
the beauty that actually has depth. This is the beauty that has truth. It's and so it I guess it pulls you back in the right direction, as it were, right?
Yeah.
And if the liturgy doesn't have that beauty, doesn't have that reverence, a true direction towards God, if there's sort of an aimlessness about it, the human heart picks up on it quickly. The
Yes,
human heart
yes.
realizes that there's not direction to this. There's not there it's not fulfilling. But when there is direction, when there is that clear, I guess, intention to offer the best of our work to God, the very
Yeah.
best of our craftsmanship, the very best of our music, the very best of everything to God, the heart picks up on it. And the heart
Yes.
realizes this is real and this is what I want.
Yes, and when you're saying that, you're hitting the key words that I don't want people to miss, is that when we give our best, we give our best. There's a joy in that. There's a
Yeah.
joy. The human heart knows when it's given its best for a glory of God, right? Which is really coming back and reflecting on us as we reflect back on and being created in an image and likeness of God and reflecting Trinitarian love. It's also being reflected back into our lives. So you see these beautiful families at these great
Mm,
liturgies, right?
yeah.
And what, three or four kids, between two young parents, and you just go, wow, that's so beautiful. And then I look at the altar and I see this priest who's just the other bookend of this love story, right?
Yeah.
That skipped,
Yeah.
as you are doing, right? This earthly marriage to go right into the heart of God, to be able to turn around and to pour this back out into prayer and into the faithful and into the rest of us. I mean, this is a beautiful love story, really.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And the
Absolutely.
last thing I'll say, and we're going to get to this book, is your adoration, because again, I just the you were drawn to adoration, and it's another key thing for young people today,
Mhm.
because and I just want to remind you what you're doing, and it's so important, and to push this out to young people, and that's what we do. And I that's why I want to get your words on this a little bit, because I want to push this out to some young
Yeah.
people that I
Yeah.
know and young families, that there's so much noise with social media apps, and we're constant streaming and this constant noise, that Satan really loves to keep you on the surface of things. And now you walk into adoration, and I'll tell you what, I see young people, when you explain it to them, you can't just bring them into adoration and tell them to sit there for, like for an hour right away. But I start with just a couple of minutes at a time, and they are drawn to that. They want to do that because they want to go beneath the surface. They're looking for peace. They're
Right.
looking for a certain joy and peace, and that's an incredible place to find it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And just the importance of silence,
Hmm.
there's a tremendous importance to silence. Just recently I read the Screw Tape Letters by C.S. Lewis, and there it's one devil writing to another, trying to sort of I don't yeah anyways.
Yes.
And he says, and he describes hell as the kingdom of noise, whereas silence and music, they belong in heaven, and devils don't want anything to do with silence or music. They just care about noise.
You know
Um,
what? I forgot about. In fact, I don't remember it even now that you say that. I have to go back, because that's CS is one of my favorite of all time,
yeah,
of course. I'm so glad you said that. I'm going to go back and search for that. Thank you for that.
yeah, absolutely. But I mean, that's true. Is
Hmm.
silence requires you to go beneath the surface. Like it's I and even in a sense, I remember reading something by the late Pope Benedict XVI, where he was talking about the different, I guess, animals in the heavens. They sing; upon the earth, they talk; in the water, it's just silence. Beneath
Hmm.
the surface, it's as it were,
Yes.
right? It's
Yes.
it's silence. But what that then does is it I guess, one, it allows us to encounter God and ourselves, as it were, for the first time, right?
Hmm.
Just like it's no longer putting like Adam and Eve. It's no longer putting leaves and garments on ourselves. It's silence is there's a nakedness about it, right? And it's this intimate encounter with the God who loves us. You know, it's not just you're looking at God. God in the Eucharist is staring straight back at you with with a burning love that is incomprehensible. Um, and that's another thing that people have a really hard time with nowadays is receiving love.
Mm,
You know, often there's a lot of activism, right? I'm going to give myself to this. I'm going to give myself to this. I'm going to give to this and this and this. But then in adoration, there's also that converse um, lesson, as it were, of receiving God's love,
receiving.
of
Wow.
realizing that
Wow.
the
Yeah.
host
Yeah.
there, that is a person, you know, and he's
Mm,
staring back at me, and he has given himself like the tremendous grace that I, a creature, dirt and mud, and before the creator of the universe. Okay, that is an incredible thought, that the creator of the universe has given me this grace to just come before his presence for a moment. I am not worthy to step foot into this room, but he's having me come here, and he's looking at me, and he's telling me that he loves me immensely. Um, it's and the silence opens that up,
yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
opens that up to that intimate encounter of here's God, and he's giving himself to me.
Yeah.
Something that you wouldn't otherwise encounter in the noise and in the chaos of so much other stuff.
Yeah, and that intimacy that you use, that word intimacy again, that this God of the universe wants an intimacy with
Mm,
me, with you. And it's mind blowing, but that's really what Jesus does. He takes on human form, and John Paul II would say, in a sense, he takes on each one of our humanities,
yeah,
right? In union and communion with the divinity, as it was kind of in the beginning before sin, and then brings us up to the Father. You see all this taking place at the Mass, right?
yeah,
So
absolutely.
so thank you for all those insights. So let's turn now. I have a couple questions on. So why don't you explain the book a little bit, how it works out, and look at it. I've been reading this for the last couple weeks is when I got it, right? And just on my knees in the morning. So I have this little prayer that I go through. I always tell people, before you look at that stupid little screen in the morning, their phone, right? Get on your knees and just make a fiat, right? With our Blessed Mother, just say,
Yeah,
your will be done, right? Or your
yeah,
word be done, whatever. Just, and then you can go about your day. Well, I've added this now, along with Cardinal Burke's novena he has going
yeah,
through the end of the
yeah,
year.
yeah.
So I had added that. Well, now I thought, well, can I add another thing? Well, these are pretty short. So explain a little bit what's going on, because I'll tell you what, Dom, David, that this has been a huge blessing already in the last couple of weeks for me. First, I'm a huge fan of Therese of Lisieux. I did a podcast series on her a couple of years ago on a retreat. And so this is right up my alley, but then pairing it with the Imitation of Christ. So explain all that. And the last thing, and then I'm going to just be quiet, is I always think of Thomas Kempis, right, with the Imitation, but maybe he didn't. I always thought of him as the author of this, but I guess we don't know for sure. So unpack that a little bit too. So I'm going to just put it in your lap. You talk about what you need to talk about, and I'm going to try to bite my tongue for a minute.
All right, great. Well, I'll try to answer all those questions to
Yeah,
see
thank
if
you.
I can get through all of them. But I guess first, just what the book is, right?
Yeah, hold that
It's
up, will you? Because I am going to put
yeah.
this on audio. I said audio probably mostly, but I'm going to put it on video too. I
Okay,
really, yeah.
great. Yeah. So anyway, so this is just for today. It's selections from the writings of Saint Therese and the Imitation of Christ for every day of the year from January 1st until December 31st. This year was a leap year. Unfortunately, it didn't have any entry on February 29th, but otherwise, yeah, it's just these bite-sized pieces that basically pairs up a passage from the Imitation of Christ with the writings of Saint Therese of Lisieux. For those who are or are not familiar with Saint Therese, the Imitation of Christ was the most influential book in her life.
Mhm.
Um, she lived and breathed it.
See,
She
that's
basically
something I didn't know either before. So that's very
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, she basically had it memorized.
Oh my
And
gosh.
so, like, one of the beautiful things about the book is, like, so often the entry from the Imitation of Christ and the entry from Saint Therese are like, "Is that the same author?" You know? It's
Oh
like,
yeah,
it's
yeah.
these are that's really similar. But what's really refreshing in a sense is the Imitation being 500 years older. Often there can be some things that are hard to digest for people nowadays. But then when you get it through Saint Therese, you know, she's um, made it her own, and then she gives it back to us. There's sort of a personal nature that takes this old text and then gives it back to us with a certain vivacity, a certain life, and a certain lovableness, because everybody loves Saint Therese.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
and then
So, so in essence, living that out, huh? Taking
yeah,
that, reading that, taking it in, and then putting it into action. And you mentioned, it's in your bio. One of the things that attracted you again was the realism. See, I'm a practical guy. I grew up
yeah,
fast, and I had to be practical, and so we don't always remember this, that our
yeah.
faith is a incarnate faith for one, and it's practical, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really beautiful when you see a passage from the Imitation, and then, like, there's a passage from the Story of a Soul, that's mirrored it, and it's like, wow, Saint Therese literally just lived that out in what she did, and she demonstrated this heroic virtue, and she really and given that the title that she's following is the Imitation of Christ, it's like, this saint is imitating Christ. You know, this saint is really Christ-like.
Yeah.
And so then ultimately, then what it is it's, it's a treasure chest pointing back to the source of all holiness, right? To our Lord upon the cross. And that's just yeah, that's incredible. Then yeah, so getting back to sort of the way the book works is, right, daily meditations. They're not too long, some of them are. It's a passage from the Imitation and then from Saint Therese's writings, some stuff from, like, the Story of a Soul, some from her letters, some from her poems. Actually, my favorite entry is the entry that the book is named after. So it's this poem that she wrote. um, if I can just read it for a
Yeah,
second.
that'd be wonderful. And give me
Um,
the page on that too, will you,
yeah, so it's
David?
January 18th. It's
Okay,
page
January
11.
18th.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's Saint. So this is a poem that Saint Therese wrote. So, I do not lift my eyes to see the clouds next day may bring. From stain of sin, Lord, keep me free this day beneath thy wing. I can endure just for today the cross that thou wilt send. The daily grace for which I pray will keep me to the end. And that I can endure just for today the cross that thou wilt send, the daily grace. That's the principle of the book. It's these daily graces, right? It's these daily graces that are on offer. That um, how should I imitate Christ today? Or what is the Lord trying to say to me today? Or, I need some encouragement, or I need some conviction or something. The book, with these meditations, are ultimately, they're these daily graces offered to us, right? And you were just mentioning, you added it to your morning prayers, and the fruit that it hopefully that it has borne and that it will bear, right?
Yeah.
That it's you know particularly, like, reading it at the end of the day, or at pivotal points in the day, to then have that turning over in your mind and in your heart, um, as um, as a source of life, a source of meditation, drawing your gaze back towards God, right?
Yes, and thank you for that. And so far, again, for me, just that taking that quiet time, to in the morning, look at, like you said, you could pray this, everybody will figure out when it works best for them. I love just starting out with something like this in the morning. I usually read scripture at night for the mass for the next day at night and go to
Yeah,
sleep with that. And then I've been looking forward.
Yeah.
to waking up to this. I really have. And there's always something that's going to touch my heart in there. I had some fears last night about some different things happening, a lot of times it's fears for my kids or my grandkids and the
Right. Yeah.
future or whatever. And here's Therese. I mean, it was a tough one this morning, but she's actually talking about it being excited because look, she felt some blood actually come out,
Yeah.
and so
Right.
she's thinking
Right.
most people would be horrified by that, and she's thinking, I think God is calling me, and getting ready to take me to heaven, and I go, whoa, wow, wow. I mean, she just gave me that courage, like, dude, you'll be fine. Get out there, we're going someplace, right? We have an end. God won the battle. All these things started going through my mind, right? And I'm thinking, Mary, crushed the serpent's head already. We're just fighting in this temporal space, and we're not going to be fighting forever. So get up, do your best, and get on with it, right? And it was beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And talk a little bit about where who put this together, right? The matching up Saint Therese with the Imitation, and then what do we know about the author of the Imitation of Christ?
Yeah, yeah. So, so this was actually, so this is a republication of something that was published last century. A Benedictine nun is from an abbey over in England, just across the water from where I am. Is the one who put it together.
Wait,
Uh,
say that again. Benedict.
so a Benedictine nun,
Oh, a nun, a
from yeah.
Benedictine
So a
nun.
nun, so a
We don't
nun
know
put
her
this.
name per se.
No, no.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just a Benedictine
She
of
wanted to remain anonymous, I think,
right,
right? It's
right.
my understanding.
Right,
Yes.
right. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. But I mean, it's the book is the characteristic fruit of the practice of Lectio Divina. So Lectio Divina is central to the Benedictine life. What it is it's a very meditative way of reading, reading, repeating, studying closely, interiorizing, and then praying with the text. And so you can see sort of the incredible attention to detail where she does interiorize these texts and is able to match them up. That you have these great treasure chests, that even though separated by such a long period of time, nonetheless, they reflect the strong current of the church's spirituality, as it were. A
Yeah, these are timeless, aren't they? I mean,
yeah,
when I'm reading these and it talks about the heart, it talks about fears, it talks about love. These aren't things that go away, Dom David,
right,
right? I mean,
right,
these are timeless, and I love the idea that here's this woman, this nun, probably started putting it together for herself, right? Wasn't
yeah,
thinking I'm going to
probably,
publish this thing,
yeah,
and didn't really care if she was put down as an author or anything, right? And it's amazing,
yeah,
so I'm saying that because I just feel even more like somebody handed me just this gift from heaven, and I'm going to talk to this anonymous Benedictine nun and just tell her thank you, and
yeah,
hopefully I can develop a relationship, just in thankfulness with her, I
yeah,
mean, it's
absolutely,
beautiful.
absolutely. And it's you know, speaking of anonymity, the Imitation of Christ, right? So it's and Thomas à Kempis is the supposed author, and I think that's pretty widely accepted. Although as a Benedictine, I'll have to throw this little wrench into the thing. Is there is a there were some suggestions going around, by different historians and such, but good, I guess, Catholic historians in the last century that actually suppose were thinking that actually this text, the Imitation of Christ, bears such striking resemblance to certain things in the Rule of Saint Benedict
Mm.
that that it was that there was and then they actually found evidence that perhaps it was a Benedictine abbot around the same time, as Thomas à Kempis who wrote it. I'm not gonna take a stand on that,
Okay.
but I'm just gonna throw it out there to maybe put up a little flag or something for the Benedictine order. It's like maybe
Yeah.
we wrote this. but
Yeah. Yes. Oh, how
but no, but
beautiful.
otherwise it's largely attributed to Thomas à Kempis.
Well, no, no,
Um,
no. Kempis, was he with a specific? Was he with an
he was an
order?
Augustinian. Yeah,
Oh,
he was
he's
an
an
Augustinian.
Augustinian. Okay.
So, and I mean,
Okay.
it's really beautiful because you know you have a Carmelite nun, or well, no, let's so you have a Benedictine nun putting together the text of a Carmelite nun
Who
who had
was Therese of
interiorized an
Lisieux, of course.
Augustinian text.
Yes.
You
Yes.
know, there's just something so ecclesial about that. You know,
Yeah.
not only is it across these different orders and these different quote unquote spiritualities, it's also across hundreds of years. But nonetheless, you know, the current of spirituality that runs through the church is just so strong and so pure and so timeless, you know, that fed us once will continue to feed us, you know.
Well, you're a witness to that. So let's wrap this up. We got about 5, 6 minutes left. Let's talk about you, because here I am after all of that you just laid out, and here I am talking to a young. Now I don't know what the difference between simple orders and your initial vows coming up, but you're considered a monk at this point. Then
Right.
right. So here I am speaking to a young monk now that has come through all of this. And now I get a chance to speak to you in Ireland, so technology does have one or two benefits, right? It brings a
Yeah,
lot of evil in, but there are good things if you use
absolutely.
properly, right?
Absolutely.
And so now I'm speaking to so tell us your heart now, and I would love to know just a couple of minutes. Look there's so much I could have asked you about Kathmandu, but your missionary parents are on my mind, and then how you converted, and how do you tell that all in 5 or 6 or 7 minutes? Look, we don't have a hard stop, but then the conversion from missionary parents to Catholicism, and then the joy that's on your face, and so in this crazy world, I mean, I think it's important. You're telling an important story
Yeah,
with your
well,
life. I
fortunately,
mean,
I have a little bit of practice getting this story
Okay. Okay,
into
good.
condensed. But yeah, no, it's I mean, as you read out on the bio. So I grew up the son of Protestant missionaries, and when we I
Were
let's
they
see,
from America? Were they from the
yeah,
United
yeah,
States?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
So they're from the States, and we um when we came back to the States when my older brother, he was just about to enter college, and my parents want him to get a little bit of experience in American high school, and then particularly because they wanted him to start preparing for college, and so it would be just more helpful for him to have the, I guess, gone through American education a little bit in order to prepare for college. So we came back the last 2 years of his high school. I was 12 years old, and when we came back, um, so maybe rewind just a little bit, that in Nepal, um, all I knew that was I was a Protestant. I had no idea about denominations, like
Yeah.
because there was only one church in Kathmandu, so everybody went to it, and like I didn't even know that like it had everything from Episcopalians to Methodists to Southern Baptists, like the whole spectrum, um, uh, and um, and so, but then we got back to the States and we moved to Texas, and Texas is just Baptist through and through, basically. And but well, I guess, and kind of non-denominational Baptist, Methodist, maybe those are the big ones. And we go to a church and just absolute culture shock. Like, is this Christianity in the US? So, we've just moved from our lifelong home in Nepal to the States, already
Were your
totally
parents the
destabilized.
pastors in this one church that you were talking about? Were they
No, no,
pastor?
no,
No. No. Okay.
they had other mission work.
Okay.
But so yeah, totally destabilizing. We move from our lifelong home to the US. Then we have this additional destabilization of like the faith looks so different here in the US than it did growing up. Because I mean, I grew up um, knowing martyrs, basically, right?
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Wow.
and um, and I mean, you, I grew up knowing that blood would be shed for the faith
Mm,
by people I know and by people my parents knew and things
mm,
like that.
mm.
And then I come back to the States and it's just totally watered down and so totally destabilized. My brother then goes to university. He starts studying great books. He's also a convert. He converted before I did, and through his conversion, he kind of dragged me along with it. Thanks be
Wow.
to God.
Yeah.
But he studied great books and started learning, I guess, reading lots of patristic texts, learning a lot of history, theology prior to the Reformation. And it's like, wait a second, a lot of this is really convincing and like seems to be real and right. Um, and so he started slowly moving towards Catholicism, and he and I are very close friends. So as he was considering it more and more, he and I had lots of conversations. He kind of used me like a sounding board. He's like, "What do you think of this? Does that sound crazy?" And it's like, "No, actually, maybe it doesn't." and then he converted, and
That's
then by
showing a lot of respect for a younger brother, actually, right? From his
well,
standpoint. Yeah.
we were
Yeah.
my family is very close. I mean,
Yeah. That's
you kind
beautiful.
of had to be, and just the way that we grew up, it's
Yes.
we were pretty tight. And then yeah, so then I made it to Baylor. I started studying great books as well.
So is
And by
that where
that
he went to school then, Baylor? Okay.
right, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And
Awesome.
then at that point, I was basically convinced of the Catholic Church as well. But even in high school, actually, what really got me, and this is why I put liturgy into the bio, was I was a big soccer player, and I would travel from where I was and go up to Dallas, which was a couple-hour drive for soccer games over the weekends. And typically they would be on Saturdays, but then one year they started getting moved to Sundays. And so it's like, well, what do I want to go to church. What do I do about church? At this point, my brother had started going to daily mass. And so
Mm.
it's like, why don't I uh, go along with my brother to daily mass? And the first time I went to mass, I was blown away by I mean it, it wasn't exquisite or spectacular, but at the same time it totally was. It was unlike anything I'd seen, and I was just this is incredible. You know, this is actually something that speaks to my heart rather than a lot of the watered down kind of a
Mm.
super emotional gooey stuff that at the other church. Like this is something that has substance to it. And I remember I went up to it was just a regular Novus Ordo daily mass. I went up to the priest to get a blessing, and he put his hand on my head, and it was like fire going through me. I was like, this place
Whoa.
is real. This place is real. Um,
See, that's
and
a Holy Spirit moment,
yeah,
isn't it? You know?
yeah.
Yeah.
And then after that, it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna keep going to daily mass with my brother. And this is incredible. And then I got to Baylor, and then I decided I'm gonna convert. Yeah, and also at the parish there was adoration every single day, and so then becoming really, really intent on going to that every day before mass, and that really doing having a lot of healing as well. And so, yeah,
You know, you mentioned Dom David, Pope Benedict the 16th. He would say he had this, and look, and I'm just paraphrasing because I haven't thought about it for a little while, but he said, you know, our faith will never be an ethical decision or some lofty philosophical idea. It's always going to be an encounter with an event, you know, an encounter
yeah,
with a person.
yeah,
And that encounter will give you a new horizon and a definitive direction for your life.
yeah,
But he always talks, the point is the encounter. In other words, Pope Benedict XVI, when he spoke, you know, he said, you know, you will encounter Christ if you stay at this. You will encounter the person of Jesus Christ. I had that experience. Many other people do. I mean, that initial time where that priest touches your head like that, you know, it's so important, I think, and maybe just speak to it just a little bit, is for us to somehow remember those moments. I mean, you need to. I always tell people, you don't have to have a diary, but just a little journal somewhere that you put these God encounter moments down, because otherwise 20 years from now, or when you personally or my age, you'll think, that didn't really happen. You know what I
Mm.
mean? You
Yeah,
need to
yeah, yeah.
you need to unpack that power of that. So speak to that just a little bit. Right? Do you feel like that was an encounter, or have you had other things? Because again, something happens to the human heart. And there's this, the saints talk about this, right? And Saint Therese, Teresa of Avila, and Saint John. I mean, they were, ooh, something's happening here, right? And not to overdo it either, right? So we're always expecting lightning, but I think that was a little lightning there on your head.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And um, well, I guess I don't really know how to unpack it other than like for me, it was just it was in a um, it was
And if
something.
you could unpack it, it wouldn't be really the mystery.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah,
So you
yeah,
don't do it perfectly, but
yeah. It
just
was
the essence of it is
yeah, it was man, it was a moment where I guess I'd been I'd cared a lot. I care a lot about my faith up to that point. Really hungering for God, really crying out, um, not being fed, and then in a moment, and even going to church, but like is God really here?
Mhm.
The people are here and they're emotionally charged, but like is God really here? I don't know. And just in that moment, it was God is in this place. Um, um, Kind of like the patriarch Jacob when he sleeps on the rock and he has the dream of the ladder into heaven.
Mhm.
And he wakes up and he says, "Surely this is the gate of heaven." Um, and or how does it go? Something like, "Yeah, surely God is in this place, and this is the gate to heaven," or something like that. Um, and um, and just given the context of everything that was going on in that moment. It was the holy sacrifice of the Mass. I was the closest I'd ever been to our Lord's true presence in the Eucharist. Um, I had never, um, you know, I guess, yeah, and then there's this moment where I mean, it's nothing else than just a conviction of the Holy Spirit.
Yeah.
Um, you know, that God spoke to my heart in that moment.
Yeah.
And the entire complex of everything that was happening around. You know, God had aligned all of he brought all of the paths into line, and everything, all the circumstances of life, everything in that particular liturgy, everything happening, so that in that moment, it was it made perfect sense, and it made perfect sense that what was happening was God, and it would be foolishness to doubt that it was him. And I mean, ultimately, that's what God does to souls. He lines things up in His providence. Even when things feel like they might be falling apart, He'll line things up and all of the circumstances in life so that he knows right when to pull on the string and catch us. You know, and
Yeah.
he prepares those moments. So often we're like, when God, when he's lining things up so that in the right moment he'll pull the string and we'll say, I know that was you. I
Mhm.
know you were there the whole time. You have been guiding and protecting and leading me this entire time, and now I'm yours.
Oh, that's so beautiful. That's so beautiful. Hey, God bless you. I really appreciate you coming on, and again, I maybe we can connect again. I love to catch up with you at some distant
Yeah,
time.
absolutely.
and here, especially maybe or maybe after you take your final vows and see how that went,
Yeah,
so do me a favor, keep the John Paul II Renewal Center in your prayers if you don't mind, and we'll keep you in ours, especially
sure
for the
thing.
young people that are out there struggling. So I think you're going to be a good example for them, and I hope that the words that you shared with us today get out to some of them, and you'll touch some hearts, brother. So
Well,
thank you
thanks
so
be to
much.
God. Thanks be
Hey,
to God.
thank you. All right, hey everybody, just for today, I'm going to have some show note links in there, so you'll be able to find that book. I highly recommend it, and it's going to change your heart, going to change your life if you keep at it. So hey, God bless you. Thank you so much. Thanks for your time. Appreciate it. Goodbye, everyone.